Here's a fun throwback one. B. Foats Jr., BFO Ats Jr., whatever, says, what if WCW never received the Monday Night TNT live spot? Could the NWO have worked on Saturday night taped programming? Now that's interesting. You're still going to start the NWO. You're still going to bring over Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, but there's no Nitro in this scenario. The A show is WCW Saturday night. Does it stand a chance to still work?
No. And this is where it gets, professional wrestling, acting, music, it's not science, it's art. And art is very, very subjective. I think that's what Jeff Jarrett says, something similar to that. Art, creative, whatever, it's all the same thing. It's whatever you're able to conjure up in your imagination and turn it into a product, whether it be a physical product or entertainment. It's all comes down to art. And with art comes perspective and instinct. That's what separates. That's why it makes professional wrestling so hard. On the surface, professional wrestling looks pretty freaking easy, right? Get two guys, two gals, whatever, don't like each other, go in there and have a scripted fake fight. Yeah. See a lot of that, unfortunately. But it's also a platform, if you really understand it, to create emotion, not just a match in the ring for no apparent reason, as exciting as it might be to some. If you can create emotion, I'm not talking about, yes, storyline. It's storyline, it's energy in the crowd, it's lighting, it's the smells, it's just everything that you're capable of sensing at a live event, a football game or a wrestling match. When you get the right amount of people in that environment and they've got a heightened interest in what's going on to the point where they're getting emotional about it, cheering, booing, throwing stuff, whatever it may be, you're creating an energy, not only in that venue, but you're creating an energy with your viewers at home. It's not the same energy, not exact same energy, but you're getting their attention. You're very subtly, and this was my goal. I can talk about this in more detail on another show. I'll give you an example. The Nitro parties. The Nitro parties, that was my idea. And it was like, I knew I needed back then. This is a perfect example. I knew I needed back then a way to create a pop culture impact, not a wrestling impact. If I'm focusing on a wrestling impact, I'm only focusing on the audience I already have. I'm preaching to the choir. So if all of my ideas were for my wrestling audience, that's exactly what I'm going to get. Maybe a lot of them, maybe half of them, whatever. But I knew if I could create, I hate to say pop culture, but it's kind of big. But if I could create an energy where people would go, did you see what? I know this sounds crazy, but you got to watch this stuff. Water cooler talk, that's what they used to call it. But the way you do that is a lot of it has to do with your environment. That's why I said, Conrad, so many times, and I probably drove Jeff Jarrett nuts a couple times because he and I had a different take on this. But in TNA, when I was there, great talent. You can say what you want about the creative. It was a roller coaster. It was up and down, but there was some great stuff in TNA before Hulk and I got there and afterwards, if you're really objective about it, in terms of the quality of what we were doing, especially when it came to aces and eights. Bully Ray talks about it much more eloquently than I can. He's right. And I used to say, it doesn't matter. When I was trying to convince Panda, who was the holding company for TNA at the time, when I was trying through Dixie, because I never really liked talking to them. But with Dixie, it was like you've grown as far as you're going to grow, no matter who you bring in There is no bring in another guy. And I specifically said, you could get your dad to get a helicopter and drop the Undertaker right down from the sky into the center of the ring at Universal Studios Soundstage number 2 or whatever it was. And you know what? The place would go nuts for about 2 weeks. And then it's like, it's Undertaker. He's here every week. See these 300 or 400 people sitting around me? They see him every week too. It's not that big a deal. That energy also communicates to your audience. So no, if everything would have stayed the same in the nWo story, everything we did, good and bad, all you do is put it in center stage on Saturday nights at 6:05 Eastern. Does anybody think we would have created that Monday Night War pop culture phenomenon?
No.
I don't either. And Vince wouldn't have done it. Vince only did it because I did it.
Yeah.
Vince was taping his shows every 2 weeks. One would be live, one would be taped. That's the syndicated show format. Only you do two shoot. You shoot one live, 3 tape. If you're doing syndication with live. That change, going to weekly live television, inside venues that looked exciting, even the Mall of America, when I wasn't sure if WCW could draw flies if we all rolled ourselves in horse shit on a hot summer day in a parking lot of Mall of America, I'm not sure we could have attracted flies. At least I wasn't until that day. So which is why we went to Mall of America, because I just didn't think we could draw. If no matter what I advertised, I didn't think it would draw. Because WCW was so ice cold at the time. It didn't mean anything to anybody. And that's what I knew I needed to do. I needed to make it feel important. But if I would have gone to live TV, if I wouldn't have been putting on, they used to call it pay-per-view quality matches, but I was putting on matches that nobody ever saw before on television. That was a lot of the dirt sheet writing. Oh, he was giving his stuff away. They're going to be out of business in 20 weeks. No, the business just adapted to what I started. And now we see it every week. Again, not pay-per-view matches necessarily, but you know what we're talking about. There's no squash matches.
Yeah.
Not like there used to be. So I take a lot of credit for things that are probably not as clear to just a wrestling fan. But if you go back and look at that time period, and this is an easy one to put myself into, if I'd have done everything exactly the same way, but done it at center stage, it would have been hot for about 3 months. Because you just wouldn't have been able to sustain the level of energy it needed to hold the television audience. And then Vince wouldn't have done it. Vince would have sat back and laughed at me for going live every week. Pal, we've been in this business for 40 years. You don't know that? But it worked. And he followed suit, as well as, like I said, putting the higher quality talent in those matches. Oh, by the way, I went from 4 pay-per-views to 6. Guess what he did? I went from 6 to 8. Guess what he did? WCW did a lot of things right. Some of them are obscure to the viewing audience because they're more strategic and tactical than anything else, and that doesn't get a lot of the headlines. But I'm sorry, it's a long-winded way. I'm just having fun with this thought. Absolutely. It would have lasted 3 months and it would have died, and WCW would have inevitably reached the same fate. It just would have happened a lot sooner.